welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Our panelists are already lined up, so let's convene the summit. And oh boy, what a panel do we have for you today from New Jersey. Joining us, Len Khodorkovsky, former senior advisor for U.S. envoy for Iran, the one and only Camelia Entekhabifard in our Dubai studios, editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian, and Dr. Ori Goldberg from the Lauder School of Government at the Reichmann University. Thank you all very much for joining us today. And our main topic, another push at a renewed deal between world powers and Iran. Who has the leverage? Is it time to make some compromises? Let's take a closer look and pick up the debate right after.
Many thought it was dead in the water, but now the Iran nuclear deal may have resurfaced for another breath of air. After talks stalled in March, things have picked up, as Qatar is expected to host informal talks with the US and Iran, and Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian is in Ankara, suggesting a change in the tide. But there is still uncertainty about this deal and whether it should be signed. Opponents, including the Israeli government, say Iran is untrustworthy, and by signing the deal, Tehran will get free reins to build a nuclear arsenal. But supporters of the deal, now reportedly including members of the Israeli intelligence, say that a bad deal is better than no deal, as it allows more control over Iran's weaponry building. But is a bad deal better than no deal? Would signing it give Iran unrestricted freedom to build nuclear weapons, or would not signing it give it this freedom? Is it time to compromise with the Iran nuclear deal?
So let's get to it. Is it time to compromise with the Iran nuclear deal? Dear panelists, you know the rules. You each get 30 seconds to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we pick up the debate right after. So, Mr. Khodorkovsky, please take the lead.
Sure. This JCPOA 2.0 would be a foolish and a dangerous deal. It's even worse than the original because it creates an illusion of boxing in Iran's nuclear ambitions. But in reality, it only extends, it gives Iran space to pursue its program. We know Iran cheated on the original deal. It still hasn't declared all its nuclear sites. We know that it has no intention of curbing its other dangerous activities, like supporting its proxies or building missiles aimed at delivering a nuclear warhead. It's continuing to take hostages. It's threatening certainly Israel and firing missiles at its neighbors. But all in all, this would be a very dangerous deal for America and for Israel and our allies in the region.
Yes, we will get to all of this in a second. But now, Dr. Goldberg, your take?
Thank you. I think differently. I think the JCPOA 1.0 and 2.0 are good deals. I think they are the only useful and effective mechanisms for creating ongoing negotiations and dialogue with Iran. I think Iran has stood by all of the decisions that it made before it signed the deal. It was a political decision. All intelligence organizations have shown that Iran stood by all of its obligations before the U.S. withdrew unilaterally. And I think this deal has to be, to the best of my knowledge, the best means to initiate a meaningful dialogue with Iran that would promote regional stability.
And last but definitely not least, dearest Ms. Camelia Entekhabifard, your take?
My take is they are going to reach an agreement, even if this agreement would last 2 years until the next U.S. elections. There is an absolute need and concern by Iranian regime to improve the economy. The real concern is Iranian people whom this bad economy has been affected their life, and they have fears of a revolution to be overthrown by the people, and they are ready for some compensation. At the same time, we are saying, I believe that the United States makes some compensation too. Before Joseph Borrell traveled to Tehran, the U.S. removed this ban on Iranians serve at the Revolutionary Guards during their military services to give them a credit and a green light. They can go to Qatar and seated on the table.
Yes, and to this point exactly, and please, dear panelists, from this point onwards, feel free to interact. Location, Qatar, right? It all fits quite perfectly with Raisi's new foreign policy raison d'etat, so to speak, right, to repair relations with the Gulf. The question is, why did the Western side of the table agreed to that, Dr. Goldberg?
Oh, confidential talks in Qatar generally tend to work. And I think this reflects exactly what Ms. Entekhabifard just said. Everybody wants this agreement. The West wants this agreement. The Iranian regime wants this agreement. Everybody is in agreement, if you will, that the JCPOA is the best means to initiate meaningful dialogue with Iran. And Qatar is a perfect site because just like the talks with the Taliban, it works when you talk in Qatar. The Qataris are generally considered honest brokers. They're not in anybody's pocket and they're not beholden to anybody. And that is why the West agreed and Iran agreed, because ultimately everybody wants this agreement.
Mr. Khodorkovsky, I have a feeling you beg to differ.
I certainly do. Actually, not everybody wants the deal. The countries on the front lines of facing the Iranian threat, like Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, and the rest of our Gulf neighbors and allies, don't want the deal. They've been lobbying the Biden administration to go easy on it. In fact, in America, there's a bipartisan consensus that the Biden administration missed a window, and they're asking the administration to figure out a plan B, because there are no longer benefits, or whatever remaining benefits were left over for the deal are no longer applicable. So there's wide consensus, the way I see it, against the deal from the parties most threatened by Iran.
So from location to timing. Ms. Entekhabifard, perhaps the question that needs to be asked is why now? And maybe, just maybe, I'm suggesting that the pending or upcoming trip of U.S. President Joe Biden to the Middle East means Tehran doesn't really want to see Riyadh and Jerusalem getting closer. And let me just remind us all that the Manama summit is taking place as we speak. So perhaps that comes into play?
Lots is happening in the Middle East, but ahead of those events you just named, we have the World Cup taking place in Qatar in November. But for me, the main reason Qatar is hosting this event is their own concern over having a peaceful, without tension event taking place. With even war or no war, high rise of the tension, it would prevent them to hosting a perfect venue in November. So this is the reason I believe there are lots of different hands playing a part to make Iran and the United States making some agreement ahead of this World Cup, which is very, very important for Qatar. And Qatar shows is a very good negotiator, is a very good dealer, has this trust from the United States and has this trust from Iran. And the regional country, before even tried to mend the relation with Iran, which we were saying, the Prime Minister of Iraq traveled to Saudi and then to Iran, they tried to mend their own relations. We saw Qatar improve its relation with Saudi Arabia, with Emirates. We saw that the Saudi Crown Prince traveled to Egypt, traveled to Turkey. Yeah. All of them, they made it to decrease the tensions because they do not trust the United States anymore. They try to have a region to solve their issues by themselves. And I believe there are many reasons, I hope we have chances to discuss, that the United States and Iran has pre-negotiations, even secretly, directly perhaps. Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if within a couple of years we hear that there was secret negotiations. And I believe even the EU's representative, when it went to Iran, they carry a direct messages from Robert Malley. He met Malley 2 days before he goes to Tehran. Right. And we know that Malley, how much is behind to making this deal.
Yes, it's...
if I may,
please.
If I may, the goal is not a deal. The goal is to prevent the world's top state sponsor of terrorism from getting a nuclear weapon. Also, part of what should have been part of the goal is to prevent the world's top terrorist regime from terrorizing its neighbors and its people, which it has no no intention of doing, neither with the original deal nor with this deal. So enriching the regime, and by the way, we will be enriching the regime, not the people. The people will never see the benefits of the money that the regime will get. They didn't see it the first time, and they won't see it this time.
Dr. Goldberg, I can hear you sigh.
If I may, I'd like to disagree with pretty much everything Mr. Khodorkovsky just said. The goal was never to take any direct steps against the Islamic Republic or to topple the regime. That is the mantra of the regime change mob that still has some presence in Washington but has very little political clout. The goal was to get Iran to the negotiations table and create a stable dialogue. It wasn't to bring about regime change. And the JCPOA was a very good instrument for achieving exactly that. I agree very much with what Ms. Entekhabifard said. There are many players, there are many agendas on the table regarding this agreement, and that is exactly why I feel quite confident in saying that I am pretty sure this agreement is going to be signed. Because this agreement, if it is signed, addresses many of these agendas. We just heard Mr. Khodorkovsky describe in a very blunt, blatant way, an agenda that is, expressly ideological. It expresses a set of opinions that is held by certain people who held positions of power in D.C. I'm quite happy that they are not in power anymore. I'm quite happy that the Biden administration's agenda is to strive for a diplomatic solution above all else. And I, again, feel quite sure that this diplomatic solution is within reach.
Well, the pendulum is always shifting, so let's refrain from gloating to an extent. But you must admit, Dr. Goldberg, that it's somewhat counterintuitive considering Iran's dire economic state, as Camelia Entekhabifard mentioned earlier. One would assume that the leverage is in the hands of the opposing side, but appears to be little.
That hasn't seemed to be effective ever since the Trump administration unilaterally withdrew from the agreement. And, my intention wasn't to gloat. I think that the agendas that we have just discussed and the players that Ms. Entekhabifard outlined for us so thoroughly, I think the meeting of interests in this case is the signing of an agreement. There is, however, the issue of an ideological beef with the Islamic Republic. That is calling it the world's greatest terrorist regime and the greatest sponsor of state terrorism in the world. I have to say two things. First, the other players in the region, particularly Saudi Arabia and its involvement in the Yemeni civil war, are I think by all accounts, just as bad as the Islamic Republic. And the other thing is, this is exactly how you curb malicious elements. You do that by bringing them to the table and by signing agreements with them, not by holding fast to an agenda that is ultimately a zero-sum game.
Obviously, I did not. I did not mean to sound critical, Dr. Goldberg, just to clarify that. And yes, please, Mr. Khodorkovsky, before we take the break.
Thank you. Well, it's not me that's calling the regime the top state sponsor of terrorism. It's the State Department that's calling it, and it's been labeled that way for over 40 years across Democrat and Republican administrations, which is just a recognition of reality. So, it has nothing to do with ideology. It has to do with the behavior of the regime. Second, I actually did
terrorism is always a political.
Actually, I did not suggest anything about overthrowing the regime. I said the point is not to conclude some sort of a fig leaf of a deal. It's to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
Right. Unfortunately, we have to take a short break, but when we get back, we will hear much more from all of you. Len Khodorkovsky, Camelia Entekhabifard, and Dr. Ori Goldberg. You're staying with us. Out for a short break. Back in a bit. Still with us, Camelia Entekhabifard, Len Khodorkovsky, and Dr. Ori Goldberg. Thank you all very much for staying with us. Before we continue our conversation, let's take a listen to what Joseph Borrell, the EU's top diplomat, had to say, announcing the renewal of negotiations. And as Camelia accurately pointed out, from meeting the U.S. envoy to Tehran. So lots of things happening behind the scenes there. Let's take a listen.
To summarize, the negotiations were stalled, no prospect of restarting, and thanks to this discussion, on the coming days, they will start again with close contacts between the U.S. and the Iranians. That's a good news, and let's hope that this will bring the JCPOA again on track. We are pushing for it. I appreciated goodwill from the Iranian side. There is also goodwill from the American side. We were very happy that they came here. But I still don't know if both will be able to overcome their respective political difficulties. Because now we are talking about political difficulties. On the economic and nuclear side, I think the agreement is there. But at the end, it is also political consideration from both sides, and I cannot foresee when and how they will be overcome.
So let's get to it, and I'm paraphrasing what has become the infamous former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's phrase, fix it or nix it. Is a bad deal better than no deal? Let's kickstart this conversation with another 30-second round each. Camelia, take the lead.
Sure. I would like to just express my opinion about the previous conversation. Mm-hmm. I should say what we heard and what we know about the region. This agreement between Iran and the U.S., or let's say between the Western country and Iran, if it comes up and signed, it's an experimental and it's temporarily, which means they would give Iran 2 years time frames until the next U.S. election to see if Iran changes its behavior in the region, if its missile program limited, if Iran nuclear program has been curbed. And as we understand, Iran doesn't have, the Islamic Republic doesn't have a concentrated program. They usually take the decision based on days, and they don't have anything they can pursue for the future. Their main concern is to inject some cash to the society, to just curve the people.
Yes. Camelia, let's put a stop right here and continue from that point in a second, but we'll just finish this round. Len, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's all in a definition of what fix a bad deal is. To Iranians, fixing the deal is what means one thing. To Americans, it's something else. I think the Ayatollah Khamenei has proven and has said many times he's not interested in fixing anything. To him, the original deal was a compromise in and of itself, and he's not interested in going beyond it. So we're not going to be addressing any missile development or proxy financing or hostage taking or any of those other things. So to think that the second or the third time around is going to change the regime's point of view, I think is a dream.
Dr. Goldberg, your take?
Well, obviously, I don't think it's a bad deal. So I don't know how relevant the question is. I think it's a decent deal. I don't think there are any perfect deals. I think it's a decent deal. I think no deal is very bad. I think no deal strengthens elements within the Iranian leadership that view the world with mistrust. I think no deal strengthens those within the Iranian leadership who claim that Iran's only means of influence is to continue its problematic regional behavior. I'm sure that a deal is the best mechanism not only to bring Iran to the table, but to bring those elements within the Iranian leadership who support engagement with the world.
Well, and from this point onwards, please feel free to interact. Maybe, as always, we need to follow the money, or in our case, more accurately, follow the oil, because a senior French diplomat indicated today that his country is willing to see sanctions relieved from both Iran and Venezuela in order to counter the situation with Russia when it comes to oil. So my question to you, with the EU hurting from energy prices, will Iran be able to get more compromises?
It's not, if I may jump in, it's not... Oh, no, please, Ms. Entekhabifard, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I thought the question was mine. Thank you. Whole the world entered to inflation, to a bad economy. Whole world is suffering. It's not only about the Middle East. They need to curb this situation. At the same time, the war in Ukraine is also damaging them. They don't want to have another tension, another confrontation with Iran. I try to say we understand all, based on documented events, based on Iran's behavior. They want to make nuclear bombs. Maybe today they make an agreement. Maybe they said they would stop enriching uranium in a high grades, but we understand them in the bottom line because Israel is their main enemy, and we understand that they were saying confronting Israel is their main issue and concern of the regime. They have to have the nuclear bomb because Israel does. Maybe these 2 years, I believe it's still at these 2 years when they have the money, they still spend for the nuclear program. Still they would spend for their proxy militia supporting, but they spend very little for Iranian people, and they would see what would be happening in the next 2 years. And for the other countries too, they were seeing the rise of another powers, China, they have here Russia, and they cannot bite on the United States only. Everyone were counting at these 2 very crucial years to see what would be next for them.
Dr. Goldberg, please.
Thank you. I mean, obviously the money is a part of it, and Iran's ability to satisfy the requirements of the EU and the United States and the world, what with the effects of the war in the Ukraine, certainly plays a part in how the negotiations will be carried out. But I don't think that ultimately this is all about the money or about the oil. That's certainly a part of it, but I think this is about a reconfiguration in the Middle East, or an expanding of the options the world, the international community, that includes both the EU and the United States, feel that that they have in the Middle East. I think there's a general readiness to view Iran as an option, exactly with regard to the expansion of China and to the changing global agendas. There is an understanding that Iran can serve as an option. There's an understanding, obviously, that Iran is problematic, that the Iranian leadership has a difficult agenda, but there is an understanding that Iran is committed to a political solution.
But problematic might be an understatement here. Maybe it's part of the Biden administration's eagerness to leave the Middle Eastern quagmire behind and let them deal among themselves, Mr. Khodorkovsky.
If I may, for a second, I don't think the United States is so eager, or nor is it able to leave the Middle East. I don't buy into that thesis. I think, and we haven't talked about Israel at all in this conversation, I think it's the Israeli agenda that is proving both problematic and difficult to carry out. I think Israel is becoming a liability for its friends, certainly its friends in D.C.
Wow, I am actually taken aback. I think we must be living in 2 different universes. To the extent in which you, sir, are giving Iran, the Iranian regime, the benefit of the doubt that that Israel is problematic and not the most destabilizing country in the region. The fact that the point of view against the deal is aligned with everyone on the front lines of Iranian threat. It's just actually shocking, and it frankly, I don't think it reflects the point of view of allow me to finish. The point of view of those who have been sober observers of the Iranian regime for 43 years. I frankly don't, if you go and you assume that the future of the free world and those who care about Western values aligns with the Iranian regime, I think you're way off base. Beyond the nuclear threat, the Iranian regime is. I think you're speaking. It's not just the most anti-Semitic regime in the world. It's also.
Why does it always get interesting in the last 10 seconds of the broadcast? I am doing it with my heart broken, but I have to stop you right there because we're forced to take a break.